The Republican persecution fetish continues with one of the worst tweets I've ever seen on this platform by one of the worst congressmen I've ever known in my lifetime by one of the worst human beings on this planet. First off, the Republicans are still playing politics about the border while going out and crying we're being invaded. But something else is being invaded right now, and it's their own party. The Republican Party is slowly approaching its final form.
Trump is the new Adolf.
And while it might seem weird to anyone that doesn't follow politics daily, like all of us, seeing Tucker Carlson gush over supermarkets in Russia, become almost orgasmic while smelling a loaf of bread, might seem like he's a weirdo to most people. But make no mistake about it, Tucker's on-the-nose propaganda that's getting so much play now because of how ridiculous it is. But it is everywhere. And it's only one puzzle piece in the Republicans' move, in MAGA's move, in Steve Bannon's move to make authoritarian politics more palatable in this country. 1 in 5 Americans believe Taylor Swift works for the CIA. 1 in 5 Americans believe Hillary Clinton eats babies. 1 in 5 Americans can barely wipe their own ass. Trump has done every disqualifying thing you possibly could for a presidency for a second term. From the insurrection and attempted coup, stealing state secrets. I mean, a jury found this guy guilty of rape, and he has to pay $400 million back. And the chuds run around, oh my God, he's such a victim. He has to pay $400 million. He has to pay that back. That's what he screwed out of the citizens of New York. This guy spent his presidency calling on Nazi groups across the spectrum, even in a debate. And just look what happened this weekend at the Tennessee Capitol. That's right. Those are Nazi flags. They're swastikas. The damage Trump did in just those 4 years set this country back 70 years. So when Tucker Carlson pulls these stunts, when Charlie Smallface says he doesn't trust black pilots, when he tries to cancel Martin Luther King, tries to remove him from history, when this bald midget in capri pants calls for a civil war every single episode of his show, and millions of Americans who watch this slop, they all nod in agreement. We have a pretty big problem. As many of you know, I'm late to this YouTube game. I spent the last 20 years outside helping to get Democrat and leftist candidates elected. But when I see these far right influencers, I guess, these YouTubers, when I see the highlights of what they're saying, it reminds me of my favorite comedian, George Carlin. You think about how dumb your average American is, and then you realize half of the country is dumber than that. Tucker and these others are chipping away every single day under the cover of, I don't know, I guess you call it anti-wokeism. But in reality, underneath that mask, underneath that Scooby-Doo mask, it's white nationalism. The Republican Party, since the time LBJ flipped them, the civil rights movement, they have been on this course. Richard Nixon 100% would not leave the White House if Watergate happened today. And that is one of the major mistakes of American history. He should have been impeached, and even if he only had to serve 6 months for breaking and entering, I know you could add on all the other stuff too. But even if you only gave him 6 months, at least you would set a precedent. At least you would set an example. Maybe then Ronald Reagan wouldn't be so brazen to orchestrate a shadow war funded by selling crack to his own country. Crack cocaine for AK-47s to fight an illegal war in South America. War crimes? I don't know. And out of like 280 indictments, one chud went to jail. Ollie North went to jail for all of it. For all that illegal shit. Ronald Reagan should have been locked up. I mean, at that point, he was probably taking orders from his coat rack. So you could have put him in a prison that's like a funny farm. But you needed to make an example of him. And I would argue, I think most people would argue, that Ronald Reagan's crimes, dwarfed Nixon's in comparison. If you mention the state of prisons in this country, a Republican will tell you, well, that's the deterrent. We don't want people to go to prison. Using their same logic against them, what happens when an American president doesn't have that deterrent? You get people like Trump with authoritarian aspirations. Now, back to this piece of shit. Newt Gingrich, who famously left his dying wife for his then girlfriend. Newt Gingrich, the paramount of Republican character. Newt Gingrich, so programmed, so instilled in him this victim complex. He has the audacity to compare Navalny to Trump. Navalny, a political prisoner who didn't attempt a coup, who didn't steal state secrets, who didn't steal billions of dollars, who doesn't fly around in a 747 or drop deuces in a golden toilet. Any chud out there with a shred of critical thinking could just look back a month or two ago. Trump's lawyers were arguing that he could send SEAL Team 6 to kill his political opponent and could not be tried for murder. And that is the exact thing that Vladimir Putin did. All you have to do is spend more than 10 seconds, then 5 seconds, then 2 seconds thinking about this very shallow propaganda. But then that requires thinking. You think this doughboy eyeing up the 16-year-old waitress at his local Waffle House? You think that thought even crossed his mind while he's on Fox News? The only thing on his mind while he's on Fox News is propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. In fact, I don't think anything has ever crossed Newt Gingrich's mind except unchecked, unmolested power. He attacked our system of government in the 90s for that very end. This Republican Party, since LBJ, since Dick Nixon took over. And don't get me wrong, Nixon did some great things. He started the EPA, he got us out of Vietnam. But he also sanctioned breaking into the Democratic headquarters. A little B&E. Send him to jail. Like I said, 6 months would do. Just have some kind of consequences, some kind of ramifications. Because he is a president. He is not an authoritarian. He is not a king. He is not ordained by God. He is elected by us. And like I said, with the lack of a deterrent, this right here took it even further. And then down the road, Trump takes it to its next level. And that's what this episode is about, but I'm sure we don't want to find out what the next step is. As I've said, I'm kind of new to the ecosphere in YouTube, the political one. I talked about the right, but I'm also kind of new to all the leftists. Granted, I've never seen the appeal of something like the Young Turks, and now that they've decided to put all their stock in culture war issues, it makes that channel even less valuable for me to watch. And I like Sam Cedar when he's on there. When he's not on there, most of the time I tune out. But one guy that was recommended to me that I really like is this Bo of the Fifth Column. And he doesn't need a shout out from me. Who am I? This guy's got almost 1 million followers. But his channel reminds me of political science classes back in Utah that I would take. Because, he looks a little bit more like me. He looks a little bit more like those people in that class. But it was important to see those people. People from blue-collar families who are left, who are Democrats, who are educated. I mean, I'm not twins with this guy. He's much more handsome than I am. But I feel like we come from the same place on a lot of issues. And you just don't see that in the other YouTubes. Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, Baby Beanie. They pump out all this propaganda and it gets fed straight to blue-collar people. And it just blows my mind that anyone in a union, anyone who's ever had to work with their hands, would sit back and ingest this bullshit from these elitists. Now, having said all that, Bo makes great content, and he makes a lot of it. And he never has to go through the trouble of making a thumbnail. I still don't know how to make a good thumbnail. But there is one kick he's been on lately, and sometimes when I see MSNBC clips, I see the same sentiment. And that's that the Republican Party is taking measures to try to oust MAGA. Behind-the-scenes coalitions with center Republicans. What does that even mean anymore? What does a center Republican look like? But they got this idea that Democrats could work with more level-headed Republicans. Like I said, what does that even mean? And you know, take all the power away from the boobarts and the MTGs. And in my opinion, I love this guy. I feel like that is just wrong. And week after week, he is proved wrong. Only on this particular thing. The guy, it sounds like I'm doing a lot of ass kissing here, but I don't want to sound like I'm going after, you know, probably my favorite left YouTuber. Everything else he's solid on, but he has to get off this idea that there's any sanity left in this party. It's on a trajectory. And this brings me to the other part of this episode. Even if I had time to do this full time, all the time, I don't think I could. I make episodes when something's burning on my mind or when I think something's funny. Okay, so I did make that Ted Cruz episode just because I wanted to try out my new mic. It's probably the most low effort I've ever done. But it did do very well, so that's good. I wanted to hear my beautiful voice through this thing. But the churn of political content from both the left and the right every single day, mostly culture war stuff, which, you know, I'm guilty of. When culture war issues rise, sometimes I address them. But the churn of it, to keep hours of content going, has left a glaring blind spot about what's happening to the Republican Party. Big Rhoda is out, right? She can finally change her name back to Romney without Trump calling her, what he call her, Mitt's fat cousin. So she can finally be a Romney again. Go back to Park City. Don't get me wrong. Rona was terrible at her job. She bankrupted the RNC. And while it was getting bankrupted, she kept buying clothes and injecting her face with more. But now Trump is sticking his daughter-in-law in there. Eric Trump's, I thought she was his caretaker, but apparently they're married. Laura Trump, incoming Tom Petty lawsuit target. Laura Trump is going to be the co-chair of the RNC. And then Trump made this Chris Lavasitia, one of his top advisors, just the de facto in charge, which isn't even a thing. But, I mean, if you're going to be an authoritarian, why not just make up jobs? But it doesn't get much worse for the next in line, this Michael Whatley, the chairman of the North Carolina State GOP. He's going to succeed McDaniel, and he's a Trump ass kisser, a Trump loyalist, an election denier. And if you're to believe Steve Bannon, in the next 30 days, they're going to replace everyone in the RNC. They're going to make it the TNC. And they're going to funnel all the money, every single dollar you give, to Trump, most likely his legal bills. Because while the coup of the United States failed 3 years ago, something tells me this weak-ass Republican Party, devoid of a platform, devoid of any values, devoid of any ideas, won't be such a hard thing to take over. Campaign managers, local elections, state elections. They're not going to get any of the funding. Laura Trump has said as much. Now, as someone who's helped fundraise for the past 20 years, this sounds great, especially when you consider the DNC is breaking records all over the place.
President Biden is leaving the White House soon to, you guessed it, raise even more money. In hours, he heads to California for a 3-day fundraising blitz, and he'll get there with a historic $130 million kitty of cash now on hand. His campaign says it raised more than $42 million last month alone.
It's almost like people are throwing their money against MAGA. As a comparison, the RNC has $8 million on hand, while Biden has $142 million. And as someone who helps fundraise, I haven't even started that yet. We're still waiting out here to see. It's going to be Schiff. The Democratic Party has picked Schiff, but we haven't even started fundraising yet out here. At least I haven't. Compound that with Trump saying he wants a national abortion ban and bragging about killing Roe versus Wade. No matter if you like it or not, it's a loser issue. It's 65-35. No matter what bubble you're in, the majority of Americans support a woman's right to choose, to make choices about her own body, to have privacy with her doctor. So while Biden's out there at the $142 million, what's left of that $8 million is going to be going to fund dip legal bills. Democrats win in November. Yay! Close the show. End of episode. Like and subscribe. Or, at 99% more likely, we see the Republican Party reach its final form. The trajectory it's been on since LBJ, when they threw their entire hand in with the white nationalists of this country, with people who hate the way this Democratic Republic is set up. The Republican Party will be the MAGA party. No more Trump loyalists. That will just be your party. And I'm telling you, win or lose, it's all in now. Who's Trump's backup? Is it DeSantis? We saw what he was like on the national stage in his high heels. You think Nikki Haley's a rhino now? Just wait till the entire party is made up of nothing than loyalists. They'll be calling her a socialist before too long. Your Romneys, your Ken Bucks, they're all quitting. Throw it in the towel. By this time next November, and you can mark my words, you can come back at me and say, you were wrong, dummy, if it doesn't happen. But you'll mark my words, there will be no more Republican Party. It will be the MAGA party. We are witnessing an institution in its final days of white nationalism. An institution that has become Icarus and is flying into the sun of fascism. And if you're a regular on this channel, ask yourself, how many times do I get sensationalist? Right? I'm pretty grounded. I could probably get more subscribers if I was always sensationalist with, some thumbnail being like, with a bomb going off behind me or whatever. But I'm not. I'm pessimistic. I've always been pessimistic. It's in my nature. But I'm also realistic. I'm saying win or lose. One of the two major parties is going to become completely radicalized. That's not to say they already aren't. But the masks are going to be off. It's not going to be a secret anymore. And they are going to be propped up by the religious fanatics who see them as a tool for getting laws passed that could, never get passed anymore to support their very narrow religion, their very narrow worldview. Things like abortion. The writing's already on the wall. Mike Johnson kills the border deal he's been asking for. They gave him everything. No matter what the chuds say, Democrats gave them everything they wanted. He calls a 2-week recess. And where does he head? He heads down to Mar-a-Lago with his daughter's virginity ring on his finger and his porn being uploaded to his son so they can beat off to the same things. In my opinion, chuds can't fit authoritarianism and their culture war issues like their Bud Lights and their Taylor Swifts. They can't fit it all into their tiny brains. So I'll give you a hint at which one they're going to choose. They're going to choose the latter. And they will slurp up whatever right-wing media serves them. Whatever talking point it is, they will slurp up whatever conditions the Republican Party wants to put this country in, as long as it supports their warped worldview and, their victim fetish, their persecution fetish. It's worth it to them to own the libs once and for all. 2024 will be the end of one of the major political parties in this country. It will be an implosion and the pieces will need to be picked up. Or it will be the end of our democratic republic and Madisonian democracy. If it's your first time here, I'm not usually this depressing, I guess you would call it. There used to be some jokes. But if you like content like this, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you've been here a while and I'm living up to the expectations and you want to support this channel, you could become a member. It gives you special emojis. I see you better when I'm live. It puts a little thing next to your name. It prioritizes you. It grants 3 wishes. So, the Chud Report.
Voters like Andy Ledeck, a U.S. Army veteran who immigrated from Poland as a child and finds Mr. Trump's NATO remarks disqualifying.
I was appalled. For someone like a former president of the United States to say something like that is beyond the pale.